And 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast, where we cover anything related to behavior change that will increase your long-term wellness and happiness. And now, here are your hosts, personal trainer and RNs, Matt and Jenna.
What is happening, ladies and gentlemen of the world? Welcome back to the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast. My name is Matt.
And I'm Jenna.
If you're new to this podcast is all about implementing behavior change for your long-term wellness and happiness. If you're listening to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all of those platforms, click the description below because there is a video version of this podcast that's happening right now. So go check it out. Jenna, how you feeling over there?
Good. It's going to be a good talk, I think.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm nerding out today because a fellow online personal trainer, his name is Ghulam. We have him on the podcast today. By all means, good sir, say hello.
Thank you for having me, Matt. How you doing? And Jenna, how you doing?
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming on today. We're excited to talk with you.
So, yes, there's a pandemic going on right now at the time of this recording and when this is released. But even had that not happened, my guy is in Canada right now, so it would have been difficult to do this regardless of a pandemic.
Yes, we're practicing safe social distancing.
Yes, so super happy to have him on. Long story short, Ghulam and I met in this course that he and I both took, and it was a bunch of personal trainers, trying to work on their business effectively, become a better personal trainer, deliver programs and all that together. And I kept seeing him on these calls, and they are actually Zoom calls because we're looking at them as we speak through Zoom. But how you just get a vibe about someone? Mm-hmm. Like you just get a vibe. Some people you never see him again in your life, but this guy, for some reason, I was like, private messaged him, "Hey bro, I know you're into this fitness thing too. You want to be friends?" And lo and behold, yeah, he actually did answer my DMs. But what's interesting about him is he is a personal trainer, but he specializes in diabetics. And I have a lot of questions for you selfishly for my own knowledge, because I have not trained a diabetic, and I have dealt with diabetes in the hospital setting as a nurse, but I haven't outside of an acute care setting. So I have a lot of questions today that I think is going to bring a lot of value.
Yeah. So let's start with just give us your background.
Where are you going right now? What? At the top of the show, we always hit you with our gratitude point. This gratitude point is something that you can think of off the top of your head, which is what we do. It's to shift your perspective that even in the middle of a pandemic, there's something to be grateful for that can shift your perspective to things could always be a little worse. Why are you looking at me with this just disdain?
Because you rambled on so long, we forgot about the gratitude point.
I didn't forget about it. You forgot about it. You want to go first?
No.
Oh, fantastic. So a few years ago, whenever I started the company, Matt Lane Fitness, I was feeling this gravitational pull, or this void, as I verbalized it to you. And I know you were there and you heard me talking about it. Before it started, I knew there was something that I was being pulled towards, that void or that gravity. And I'm very grateful that I had the foresight to feel that, to see that, and went after that. So I'm thankful for the gravity or that void that fitness wellness pulls me to. I really am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
Right?
Yeah. So the thing that I'm grateful for today is having the opportunity like today, and we had a live on Matt's YouTube channel last night, and the opportunity, what are you doing?
I'm changing the lights. Go ahead.
To just still socialize with people, even though we're not able to go see people in person. We still have that unique opportunity because of what you're doing online to still interact with people and have that socialization and not feel so isolated.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that.
Yep. Totally agree. Ghulam, if you have one, man, hit us with it. If not, no pressure, no biggie.
Yeah, I do. I'm a little bit well prepped because I do a gratitude journal every morning. So
awesome.
I'm always grateful for 3 things in the morning. And I think the one that I think would be most impactful right now is I wrote it down this morning was the ability to take a breath.
Yeah.
without any issues, because right now everybody that's suffering with the COVID situation, they're drowning in their lungs, right? They
Yep.
can't breathe. I think the fact that we can take a full breath without any issues, without even thinking about it,
Yep.
breath after breath, is a blessing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that.
Yep. I totally agree. It's so pertinent, and you're right. We take it for granted. Like, just right now, like, do it right now. If you're in the car, if you're driving, take a deep breath. Just press pause. Okay, you back? Like, how was that breath? That's great, right? All right, Jenna, let's start. Let's go. Let's dive into it. You want to start off?
All right. Now, please give us your background, how you got into online training, why specifically training diabetics.
Okay, yeah, sure. I've been in the fitness industry for about 8 to 10 years, and I got into it accidentally, actually. It was actually around the time when I was in high school. I used to be kind of chubby. And, in the summer times, I used to, spend a lot of time outside not doing productive things. So my mother decided to tell me to get a job. And my my neighbor at the time, he was a contractor for building high schools. And he used to be the foreman for the plumbing section. So I started working with him. He got me a job. I used to work 17 to 18-hour days, 7 days a week. 2 months at a time. Used to make quite a bit of money, but during that process, I lost my weight because there's a lot of labor, a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And near the end of it, I started to get a little bit of muscles coming in, and I was like, "Hey, this is nice."
That's pretty cool.
The next year, I decided to take an exercise science course and learn a little bit about working out. Did the construction again, and ever since then, I kind of just really liked the way my body looked, and I never wanted to lose the progress that I made because I knew the hard work that I had put in to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, it had become a lifestyle. I kept doing it. And then, naturally, when you do something like that, people start asking you, hey, like, what did you do? What are you doing? And then from there, I took a complete shift and I went into theology. It was a weird time in my life where I wanted to find myself a little bit more and, figure out more of the, what the purpose is. And
Mm-hmm.
I studied theology for 4 years, different religions, at a university. And then I figured out, okay, I think I want to go back to my calling of, I've always been fascinated with the human body, the way that it functions on its own, the way that it does beautifully, and the grand design behind it. So then I went to university and I took kinesiology and exercise science, and then I specialized in exercise physiology in my last year in a fitness stream, which was beautiful because I got the chance to get a contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is the hockey.
Well, yeah, we know. Wait, what? Bro, oh my Lord. Okay, first of all, he said theology. Now he says Toronto Maple Leafs. If you're new to this show, we're big fans of hockey, so I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but we got either another podcast or you got another long-ass phone call with me, my guy. Go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, so I got a contract to do that, and I did the fitness testing for all 64 players in the roster. So that was huge for me.
Wow, yeah.
Then that opened up the avenue for athletic training. I finished my exercise physiology certification and diploma, and that's when I got introduced to chronic diseases and all different types. But what stuck out the most to me was diabetes, and this is part of the reason why I decided to specialize and start specifically working with diabetics, is because it's very close to my heart. My mother is a diabetic. She's a type 2 diabetic. She's been a type 2 diabetic for about 12 to 15 years now. And all I've always wanted to do is figure out a way to help her so that she can, get rid of the disease and she could be alive long enough to stay here for me and, for my kids. I have a baby boy on the way. So
Congrats. I didn't know that.
Thank you. Yeah. So, this is my selfish reason, and I just focus more on it. And ever since then, after that, I got into the field. I started coaching clients, training in person, and I've trained for about 6 to 8 years now, and I've trained everybody from all walks of life, from kids to athletes to, the elderly, everybody in between, hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, type 2 diabetes, asthma, congestive heart failure, you name it. So I had a big, broad exposure to the general population. And then I realized there was something missing because the clients would come in and out of the door and they wouldn't really have, as you guys have the theme for this podcast, a sort of behavior change that allowed them to sustain the progress that they have made. So I realized there's something missing than the everyday you come in, you train someone in person for 1 hour or 3 days, 3 hours a week, and they leave. There's the whole mindset and the whole behavior growth change that's missing. So that's when I decided to look into online. And I realized that through online coaching is where you can offer that at a very grand scale, which actually leads to actual behavior change that allows them to not only get results, but sustain them. And that's how I got into the online training last year ago. And since then, I've just been doing full-time online because it's just been so much more impactful and so much more fulfilling for me.
That's awesome.
Heck yeah, man. So I'm not going to lie, that's a fairly unique story that's how you stumbled into it. Jenna and I were talking before we got on the show, and we were going to ask the specific question, assuming maybe you were a diabetic and that's what pushed you into it, but that's not the case. So very, very interesting, your path, and with ultimately your mom as well. So interesting story. Interesting.
Yeah, for me, what happened was I'm predisposed to it, right, genetically, because of my mother.
Yeah.
So I do have like a very slight scare in the back of my mind. I don't want to get it. I've also been very confident that I wouldn't because I'm just so active. But I really realized when I started helping my mother, and when she dropped her blood sugar levels to normal, as soon as she told me, I just started to, I got really emotional, and I wasn't expecting that.
I'll bet.
And I that's when I realized, okay, this is not just something I say to myself. It's real, because why would I get emotional if it wasn't so close to me? And then I realized that, the way that I feel, anybody feels about their mother or their father, their family. I know everybody else that has diabetes feels the same way. They have kids, they have spouses that feel the same way. So I want to be able to help them as well. If I can help my mom, I can help everybody else, because working with a family member is different than working with someone outside. It's a lot harder to cause behavior change when it's family members. So yeah, that's why I went into that route.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and to quickly sort of break down, a diabetic type 1, you're born basically a diabetic. Diabetic type 2 is you develop it, correct?
Yep.
Just we're all in it, right? I know, but a quick analogy for anybody that doesn't know.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Jenna.
I was just going to ask if you primarily work with type 2 diabetics, or are you working with some type 1s as well?
Yeah, so type 1 and type 2, you're not necessarily born with type 1. You might have they still don't really understand what causes the autoimmune response for you to develop the type 1. But mostly you develop type 1 in earlier adolescence. Sometimes you develop it later as well, but type 1 is usually developed a little bit earlier in your life. I don't believe you're born with it for the most part. Sometimes you're born with it. You might have a disposition because if your mother has gestational diabetes,
sure.
Then yes. But type 2 is something that you can develop. And there are certain cases where you're a type 1 and a type 2 together. So there's a vast variety of, instances, but 90% of the population is type 2 diabetic. There's only 10% that's type 1. I actually only work with type 2s. So that's how I do.
Okay.
And how do you find your clients, or how do they find you?
So it's the content that I create. I try to create content that is reflective of the space that I'm working with. It's also referrals, and just over the years of working with so many variety of people, now that I've let people know that I'm doing this, they're starting to come into that space. And then obviously, doing work like this, educating and discussing and raising awareness. I was fortunate enough to be invited as a keynote speaker at Ryerson University last month by Diabetes Canada. So I did a lecture on diabetes there. So that was just slowly trying to create more awareness.
Very cool, man. Very cool. Yeah, and so I don't know, because you're are you certified? Who are you certified through?
So I'm I have my degree through York University as a kinesiologist. Well, I'm not a kinesiologist. I'm not registered, but in kinesiology.
Okay.
And I have my diploma of exercise physiology through York University as well.
Okay.
Through an organization called Health Fitness Federation, HFFC. Yeah. So Health Fitness Federation Canada.
Okay, gotcha. That was one thing I sort of wanted to touch on is, like where your qualifications and whatnot. And we are going to plug all of his information in the description below, because we absolutely want, if anybody is listening and they struggle with, diabetes and they're trying to work on their wellness, fitness, we absolutely want you to reach out to him. So it will be in the description below, and we'll have you plug it towards the end. But again, I have just numerous questions. I think when I think of diabetes, so again, the little that I know of diabetes is I worked in a ICU as a nurse, and I dealt with very sick people with extremely high blood sugar levels that we had to actually use insulin drips to get the blood sugar levels down. Outside of that, I really did not work with diabetes that much, and in fitness, I have not worked with it that much. So there's going to be a lot of knowledge from me here today. I think here's the initial big question: are carbs the devil?
That's a good question. Well, it's tough to give a definitive answer, especially when it comes to diabetics.
Sure.
Ideally, yes. If you're a diabetic and you have very high blood sugar levels, one of the easiest and fastest ways to reduce your blood sugar levels is to limit your carb intake so that your insulin doesn't spike as much, so that the sugar levels don't go as high. But if you look at a macro level, you have to look at the root of the disease and what we're trying to do here. A lot of the things that I've noticed that the clients that I work with that face is that we all grow up in some sort of culture that is, carb heavy.
Yeah.
You're just born that way. So that's like our default, right? So having said that, in theory, yes, you take out the carbs for diabetics, the diabetes the sugar comes down. The diabetes doesn't necessarily get better. There's a difference there. We'll talk about that. But, yes, they can do it. They can do it for maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month, maybe 3 months. There's going to be a time where they're going to give up, and the willpower is going to come down, and they're going to start to reintroduce carbs back in, and then it's going to be a vicious cycle. So there needs to be a balance. I feel like the industry, especially the healthcare professionals, especially the doctors as well, they do demonize it a little bit.
Yep, I agree.
And it creates this scary place for diabetics where they're actually scared of eating it, and they hate themselves and they feel guilty when they do, and it's like a vicious cycle when it comes to behavior change.
Yeah,
it doesn't help. So I feel like a balance is important. But what I do with my clients is I teach them to use the carbs to their advantage. So what you want to do is, if you want to, again, you also have to have a balance, but you also have to have some sort of self-control as well.
Sure.
Right? I feel like when we're talking about food, when we're talking about nutrition, we know what we have been taught and what we're used to eating through our default setting of our families, generations, and parents, because nobody really learns how to eat. You're not really taught how to eat. You just eat whatever is there.
It's true.
Not necessarily if it's good or bad, but you obviously do need control in that self-control. So what I do is I tell them to that, okay, yeah, you should limit them, obviously. But if you feel like having it, try to have it before you exercise. So you can utilize that quick source of energy and burn it up during your exercise, and you're totally okay.
Yep.
And they monitor their blood glucose levels, and they get that positive feedback that, okay, hey, look, I ate something, my sugar went up. Okay, cool, no problem, nothing to worry about. Let's exercise a little bit. They exercise for 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and they see the blood sugar drop right away, and they see that positive connection that, hey, number one, I can eat carbs and it's totally okay. Number two, if I exercise, my blood sugar goes down, and that's a really good thing. So exercise is important, and it's good for me, and I should keep doing it as a diabetic. So I help them depending on the person. And again, it's person to person, right? Everybody's different. You can't use the same approach for everybody. So that's also something that I use. But carbs are not the devil. They are definitely not the devil. I think no food in and of itself, or no macronutrient in and of itself, is going to be bad or good for you. You have to be able to use a balance and understand what is happening with your body and learn about it, because that's just that's a process of behavior change and learning more about yourself and growth, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I Obviously, I'm not in your realm, but I love that answer. I love that because that's so what I push with my clients. You know, that balance piece is just huge. And I did wonder, you know, and I've always said anybody that's ever asked me about diabetes, I've always been very quick to say, you know, I don't specialize in that. I'm not well educated enough to tell you. But I have always believed that I feel like it's probably a little bit different of a balance for a diabetic than a non-diabetic. Would you agree?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Diabetics should definitely adapt a low carb diet.
Okay.
Definitely, because it is more beneficial to them. Especially, it depends on the severity of their disease and where they are at, right? If their glucose levels are severely high, then that's going to be having a direct impact all over their system on a multi level. So they need to reduce them fast. And one of the fastest ways to reduce them is to drop the blood sugar levels. But if you're a diabetic that has been managing their diabetes for some time, then you can play around with it more. But generally, yes, you would want to be on a lower carb and diet, but you can still eat carbs. It doesn't mean that if you eat carbs or you have that one slice of pizza and now your whole world is going to come crashing down. There's a lot of diabetics out there that demonize it in that sense and make everybody else feel scared as well. But the reality is, before you even knew you had diabetes, you already had it. You just didn't know. You were still eating that stuff and you were still alive. You're still working. You're still functioning. It's not having a direct impact yet unless your glucose is that high. If your glucose is very, very high, you will see physical symptoms. Mm-hmm. That is when things get scary.
Yep.
And if that's the case, you need more than just low carbs to help you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and you know, that I think this gets missed very often, and you know that this is really popular in the fitness realm. Keto versus low carb. First of all, do you think that keto is an answer to a diabetic's prayers?
So I think that what often happens a lot is, see, the industry, the way that it's going and the way that it's been now is that everybody supposedly wants to say that they have the answer.
Yeah.
And they present themselves as, hey, this is the one thing that you need to do in order to, you know, get better. In my experience and in my education and all the practical experience that I've had, every single thing works, right? A keto diet will work. A low carb diet will work. A high protein diet will work. A paleo, anything you name it. They will all work as long as you are consistently following it. If you can stay consistent with it, it'll work. But if you're not consistent, nothing will work. At the same time, you also have to consider there's, you know, you can know the most amount of information, you can have the best information, but if you don't have a way to get it in front of people and for them to actually take action, what you know is useless. So I feel like a lot of times that one thing comes in is that it allows you to get in front of more people and for them to listen.
Yep.
So if I tell you, hey, I have this one secret, this is gonna cure your diabetes, and it's intermittent fasting, or it's keto, or it's this, because I'm taking this one approach, you're gonna listen. But if I say, hey, you just need to create a balance, you need to eat well, you need to be in a calorie deficit, you need to eat your fruits and vegetables, you're gonna be like, okay, tell me something I don't know, I'm not gonna do it.
Yep.
Right. So in terms of comparing keto to intermittent fasting to low carb, at the end of the day, what's going to matter is you have to decrease the visceral fat around their stomach, between their organs, the dangerous fat that is causing the inflammation and the damage and increasing their insulin resistance. You have to decrease that. And the only way you can do that is to remain in a calorie deficit.
Oh my God. So you can't see it, but I'm clapping right now. So, and that was going to be my very next question, because that's something that I'm so like, I look at fitness wellness when it comes to the physical body and whatnot in three basic tiers, you know, that in order of importance: behavior change being on top, nutrition being second, and activity being in third place. All very important, but it takes all of those to be well. And what I push so much, if anybody asks, what is one tip that you'll give me? I will say, do you know what your caloric maintenance is? Are you in a caloric deficit? You know, like, do you know what's going in? Do you have that caloric budget or that energy budget? And that was going to be my very next question. Is it a caloric deficit that's more important, or is it that your carbohydrates are at a certain number for a diabetic?
So it would be the caloric deficit. That is always going to be the most important thing. However, there are certain situations that allow you to not be in a caloric deficit when you're diabetic. For example, the medications you're taking, or because of the hormonal changes, you might be in a position where you're just like sometimes diabetics get these crazy uncontrollable like waves of they need to eat.
Yeah.
So if your hormones are out of whack, right, your leptin, your ghrelin are out of whack because of what's happening with your medications or just the condition itself, it's going to put you in a position where it's going to be way harder for you to be in a calorie deficit. You're going to binge. You're going to start eating, and then you're going to be in a calorie deficit. You're going to be in a calorie surplus.
There you go. And then that's where there's where that balance comes in. I'm just gonna keep firing off if you don't, because I've got a list of questions here. You want to
go? Well, I guess thinking through like just what you've just mentioned about medications, are you finding that your clients are really having to watch and maybe adjust medications as they're losing weight, increasing activity, eating fewer carbs, that sort of thing?
Of course, it's a good question. So that is something that needs to be highly monitored and managed as you work with diabetic clients, because with diabetes, there's always a risk of having hypoglycemic situations happen, which means that their blood sugar levels drop too low, and then they can potentially faint and sometimes even die from it. So if you get into some diabetic ketoacidosis situations, which is also when that's another condition that could be very fatal for a lot of diabetics as well. I don't want to get into the details of that, but when we're getting into the medication side of it, my goal for my patients is always to guide them in a sustainable way so that they can be off their medications. So we slowly work on a week-to-week basis, monitoring the things that they're doing, and we start to pull them off slowly, and we see what happens. If we pull them off too quick and the blood sugar level go too high, then we put them back on a little bit. Mm-hmm. But if they're sustainably keeping their sugar levels where they're supposed to be, we're starting to get them off the medications. Again, different medications will do different things. And most of the diabetic patients, they're already prescribed through the doctors or the nurses that they've already seen. Mm-hmm. And the unfortunate thing about diabetes is that, and the education system or the system that it works with, is that the first response to someone getting diagnosed with diabetes is to automatically put them on medications. Mm-hmm. Without having any sort of secondary approach. It's just, okay, let's get you on metformin.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. Metformin is the first one, and then but what they don't realize is that this has a huge impact on their behavior change. Because what they do is they start to use the medication as an enabling tool to allow them to not get better, because they keep relying on it. Because if you talk to any diabetic patient or diabetic, their medications, they don't ever decrease the medications. The medications continuously increase.
That's
true.
It
goes from 500 to 1,000 mg, to 2,000 mg.
Yep.
Then metformin is out of continuous, but now you got to get on another medication, another medication, up until now you're on insulin.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's a lot of it is unfortunately run because of the pharmaceutical industry. And it's obviously all about making the money. So that's a huge aspect of it. That's a whole kind of worms.
My Lord, man, I'm telling you, you better block your number, because I'm telling you, we got many more calls and podcasts to talk about. Go ahead.
Of course, no problem. I love to share this type of stuff. So with the medication, yes, it does help. It does help to reduce their blood sugar levels, but it enables them to rely on it. So they're always just looking at it as, okay, I'm okay. My sugar levels are fine. I'm taking metformin, but you can't realistically continue to eat the way that you've been eating and have the lifestyle that you've had and continuously eat more and more stuff that is not good for you and hope that the medication will do its job. There's going to be a point where you're eating more or you're eating the wrong stuff, and now you need more medication to match that. And that's what ends up happening. But in their minds, in their subconscious mind, they have this assurity or this, I could say, peace that, oh, I'm okay. My sugar levels are okay because I'm having medication. But their diabetes is not getting better. if you're getting on more and more medications, what is that telling you about the disease?
Yep.
It means it's becoming more progressive. And it is a progressive disease because, well, I think anything is a progressive disease unless you take care of it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So this whole notion about diabetes being a progressive disease with no cure, with no end at the end of the tunnel, no light at the end of the tunnel is false. And this is the story that is told to them right away, and which is why they accept what they get right away, and they just live the way that they're living, and they don't get better.
Yep. So, and we treat symptoms. We don't treat the cause, and we don't treat the root, and that's where my problem has always lied with where healthcare falls down, point blank. That's why I'm so drawn to fitness wellness, because it's in your hands to treat the cause, and it's these simple things that you're saying. And my next question is, do you feel like healthcare educates someone? First of all, do you think they educate them? And then do you think they educate them well enough?
No, I don't think they educate them. I think they educate them. I think they try to educate them. I think there's a lot of diabetes education programs that are out there.
It's gotten better. It has gotten better.
It's gotten better, but I think the practical work on the holistic side is a lot less than the medicinal side. So because they're not aware of, and I think a lot of behavior change is missing for them. So to be able to, this is where being a coach is different, when the mindset work is missing. So you're not understanding where the person is coming from. And you're just shoving things down their throat, be like, hey, just take this and you'll be okay. And they'll be like, why am I taking this?
Right.
What is it going to do to me? What is it going to do for my body? And they don't understand. And I think a coach's ability to break down things into the most simplest ways of understanding is one of their greatest strengths. So if you can explain to someone that a process is very complex and break it down to being very, very simple, and they actually understand what's happening with their body, that is you won.
Yes.
Because most diabetics don't know what's happening with their body. Unless you have a scientific background, like you took bio or any sort of science courses, right, you really don't know what's really happening with your body. And up until I don't know what's happening, how am I going to be able to work on it on a day-to-day basis? You know what I mean?
Yep.
So for the education system, I think it's important too. I think medications are also important. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of instances where the diabetes is so bad you can't do the other approach. You have to first go down the medication route, just to get their physical symptoms in check.
Yep.
And then we can start to wean them off eventually. So I definitely think there's a place for the medications. I don't want to completely take them out of the question.
Agreed.
But I feel like the first thing that needs to happen is to really empathize with the patients, with the person that has diabetes, because for my mother, at least, I noticed that a lot of the symptoms of diabetes is you're always tired. You're always tired. You're always lethargic. You have no energy. And what that does is it paints this picture to the people around you that you're lazy. Mm-hmm. But they really don't know what's happening inside your body. They don't know that you have to fight every ounce of your body, every atom in your body to fight yourself to get out of bed and do something as simple as, cook breakfast or, clean the house or whatever. But they're going through that struggle day in and day out. And eventually the narrative becomes that diabetes is a character flaw. Yep. Mm-hmm. God. But it's not the case. So if you can empathize with them and let them know that, hey, you are not the disease. This is something that, has happened over the span of years. See, diabetes doesn't develop over one day. The insulin resistance usually starts 15 to 20 years prior to your diagnosis of diabetes. That's a long time of your body trying to correct itself, and it eventually doesn't, and that threshold happens, and then you're now, okay, I'm a diabetic. Yep. So empathizing with them and helping them understand that, it's okay. We have this situation that's there. Let's try to educate you what's happening with your body, and let's figure out a way for you to get better, because you can get better. I think that hope is what's missing. Diabetics don't get this hope that, hey, look, you can potentially reverse. I don't like to say reverse. Well, I don't mind saying it, but I get heat for saying it. Yeah. Or go into remission. right?
Sure.
Like being able to be not a diabetic anymore, the blood sugar levels are okay, and you're able to maintain that.
Yeah.
I think that would be reversal.
Yeah.
Off medication, and that's the point. Off of the medication.
Off the medications,
Yeah.
your A1C is is good to go. That's success.
Yep.
Because you can continue to maintain that, and you have no issues, and you put on 10 to 15 years on your life.
Yep.
So I think that hope for them is huge. For most diabetics, they're depressed. They don't care. They're going to keep eating what they're eating. They're like, whatever, my sugar's going to go up anyways. I'm just going to have more medications. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Whatever. I'll just keep living my life. Whatever. Who cares? Because a lot of it is the narrative that they've been told, or they've been, brought up with.
Yep.
Now that's what the story they keep telling themselves.
Yeah, and it's very unfortunate because that right there, that's truly not that person's fault. Like, because they don't have that this diabetic, the newly diagnosed diabetic, they don't have that education. They were told one thing, and that's what they just run off with for the rest of their life. Like, it's unfortunate. They are almost they are almost a victim of it. And again, I'm truly not pointing fingers. I'm really suggesting how it could be changed, and that is what you're doing. That is with behavior change. That is with balance. So, another thing I did want to ask, because I think this would probably be a common question: slow digesting carbs or fast digesting carbs. Basically the difference would be, a sweet potato versus table sugar. Have you found that those make a difference? Do you try to implement that with your clients?
100%. That's a great question. And yes, I do try to implement slower digesting carbs. I think that it comes into the area of the glycemic index.
Sure.
And what the glycemic index is for the listeners that are watching or that are listening, is that when you eat a food, it has a response to the amount of insulin that is spiked, and based on that, the amount of sugar that is released, or how high the sugar goes. And the higher it goes, the higher the index is, and we want it to stay low. Yep. So there are certain foods that have a lower index, that are lower on the glycemic index, and there's certain foods that are higher. So what the general consensus is that you want to eat foods that are on the lower glycemic index for diabetics.
Got it.
But what most of the population doesn't know or is missing is that when we combine foods, the glycemic index totally changes. Okay. So unless you're eating just that sweet potato, then yes, it's a lower glycemic index. But if you're combining it with, you're never just going to eat a sweet potato. You're always going to have, chicken, broccoli, whatever else you have, or you're having pasta, whatever food you're having. There's now a mixture of foods. So now the glycemic index goes out of the ballpark.
Right.
So of course, yes, you would want to implement lower glycemic foods that have a slower release, so that the body has more time to manage the fluctuations and to normalize the blood glucose levels, ideally. But when you start to combine more foods together, then that kind of, is shaky for you. Yeah. At the same time, like I said, it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, as long as we know what we're doing on a macro level, which is to continue to exercise and the rest of the things that we know.
Yep. You want to go? No.
I do. I'm just a curiosity. Just because we are from different countries. Do you train any Americans?
Honestly, there's over 100 million Americans that are diabetic or type 2 or pre-diabetic right now. But surprisingly, I have not been able to, I haven't trained any Americans yet. I don't know why that is. I think it's because it's just my network is mostly within people that I know. So I'm mostly, but yeah, it doesn't matter to me where you're from. I just want to help. So I train some people in Australia. I have some clients from Bangladesh as well. And of course, I probably will be training people from America as well, because they have a bigger, they have a bigger scope that needs help.
Yeah. Well, and the reason why I ask is it seems like some of the patients that I've interacted with, their mentality seems to be, well, I have a pill for this, so there's no reason to change.
Yep.
I just take my pills, and changing is too much. My family's not going to want to change. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and take this medication, and I'm fine. There's no reason to change. Do you find that with your clients as well? Sometimes I feel like that's maybe just more of an American mentality.
I was going to say, did you mean that country to country? Is that what you meant?
Yeah. I'm just curious if that's more of a broad thought process or if that's more unique to Americans.
I would think that I think culture does have a play in a lot of things that we do on a day-to-day basis. A lot of decisions that we make, the cultures that we come from makes a big difference. Like I mostly have worked in the past with South Asians, and I know the South Asian population is heavily suffering with diabetes as well. But I've noticed that what it comes down to is how you feel about yourself.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
and your relationship with yourself. Like I mentioned earlier, is most diabetics are depressed. I wouldn't want to name it depression, but like they don't care anymore. They've given up.
Yeah.
So if you don't care because you don't love yourself, or you don't have that first self-respect for yourself and your body because you haven't understood what's going on, then yeah, you're gonna take the easiest way out, which is just take a pill. And forget taking a pill. You won't even do something as simple as, do something like physically active for your body, something good for your body.
Yep.
So it's not just about the pill. It's about everything. You have to break down what's going on in their mind, what's going on in their subconscious. What are some of the beliefs that they've told themselves about themselves? Because they don't like themselves. Anybody that likes themselves would do everything they possibly can or anyone that's happy.
There you go.
Anyone that is fulfilled, do anything possible to get better, to get in the position that they need to be in. And that's not their fault either. They are a product of their environment.
Scarlet letter.
Yep.
Yeah. So they're a product of their environment. Maybe it's the way that they've been brought up. Maybe it was some childhood traumas they've had. Maybe it's the friends that they're around. Maybe it's their spouse. I have certain clients with their spouse things like, why are you doing this? It's not going to work. You're not going to lose weight.
Yeah.
And to me, that's very, I feel sad when I hear that, because I'm like, wow, how much harder must it be for you to make a change?
Yeah.
Because your direct environment is not in favor of you.
Yep.
So I think it's bigger than that. I think it goes back down to the theme of the podcast, behavior change, right? Yep. And that comes down to learning more about who you are and why do you do the things that you do?
So if there was a diabetic out there, and I know it's very difficult to give broad advice, but if somebody says something to me, what's the number one tip? I would say caloric balance. If there was one tip for a diabetic, what comes to your head? Really putting you on the spot, I know.
Or maybe it would be easier to narrow down where to start.
Okay, yeah. So your first starting point, or what do you think the most important piece is?
I think where to start would be to educate yourself. Just find out what's happening to your body first.
I like it.
When you know what's happening with your body and you understand what's going on, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit just to kind of educate the audience that is listening right now. Once you understand what's wrong or potentially wrong, then you can figure out a way to start getting towards fixing it, right? If I tell you, you need to do this, X, Y, and Z, you're like, why am I doing it?
Why?
Because until you believe something, you won't do it. And until you don't take action towards something that you believe, you won't be able to attain and have the results that you're looking for.
Yep.
First, you need to have a firm belief that, okay, this is the situation. Let's figure out how we got here. Now that we're here, we're acknowledging it. We're taking accountability for it. Now we're going to take steps towards executing actions that are going to help us achieve the goal, which is eventually to get off the medications, get into remission, and live a diabetic-free life that is going to be a better life. Because I strongly believe that we all faced with adversity to help us become stronger. Somebody that's diabetic has to do a lot more work than somebody else, but that puts them in a stronger position than somebody that is not.
Yep.
Right? Maybe they will become healthier than someone that doesn't have diabetes eventually, because they are so much more in tune with their bodies, their nutrition, their exercise. And now they're going to be able to live a lot longer than someone that doesn't have diabetes, but is living a really shitty life and is being really bad to themselves, right? So that's what I would say. I would say to first educate yourself.
I love it. Yes. Yeah, and you're right. You're going to be faced with adversity. So I think the way you look at it, your perspective of it, that flips the script, that changes the game. So, and the education piece, I totally agree. Go ahead.
One thing that I wanted to mention is that
Please, yeah.
a lot of the demonization of the industry comes from when we talk about it being the diabetics' fault is that, oh, you're lazy, so you have diabetes.
Right.
You're fat, that's why you got diabetes. You don't work out enough. You don't do any exercise. You don't move anything. So it's all your fault. But that's not the case. We actually don't know why insulin resistance develops. We don't know. We have ideas. There's no source. There's no affirmative reason. We don't know if insulin resistance causes obesity or if obesity in turn causes insulin resistance.
And for anybody that doesn't know, insulin sensitivity, just a quick little dirty of what it is.
Of course. So with diabetes, the main issue is insulin resistance. So this is going to be good because I can just explain what diabetes is at the same time.
Okay, cool.
So,
Perfect.
so what we first have to understand how the normal person, a person that does not have diabetes, how their bodies work, right? So when we eat something, our body has to utilize the food or the energy that we're eating in a source of fuel for itself to sustain itself. So when we eat something, the body has to now take the food in the form that it is and break it down so that we can use it. Now it'll break it down into the forms that you give it. So if it's fats, it'll be broken down into fatty acids. If it's protein, it'll be broken down into amino acids. And if it's carbs, it'll be broken down into glucose, which we can use for energy. So think about glucose as batteries for your cells, right? Now, the glucose, it has to first enter the cells of our body so that the batteries can be used. If they cannot enter the cell, we cannot have any power, so we can't function. When a normal person, the ability to the glucose or the batteries to enter the cells, it needs a key to open the lock of the cell. It's an easy analogy, and that key is going to be insulin. So when you eat something and you have some carbs in the system or some protein in the system, the brain sends a signal to the pancreas, which produces insulin, to release some insulin into the bloodstream so that there's a lot of keys available that can go and attach onto the cell to open them so that the glucose that's now coming in through the food can now enter the cells and then we can use it for energy, right? That is the way that a system works. And our body's extremely smart. We always want to maintain a certain level of blood glucose levels in the body. And it's so sensitive to that as soon as a little bit of spike happens, the insulin is released so that the energy can go into the cells. And as soon as a low happens, we don't have enough glucose in the system, then the body will release glucagon that will help to release some of the sugar from the liver where it's stored as fat. And now we have energy. So the body's always trying to remain in a homeostasis where it's always trying to balance the energy and the glucose levels that are there. So that's for a regular person. So you eat, the insulin is released, it opens the cells, the food goes in, the glucose goes inside, we have batteries, now we are charged, we can move and we can do our activities. When it comes to a diabetic, the system has some malfunctions. And this develops over time. This is nothing that happens right away. It takes years, like I mentioned. What happens is that we have the key for type 2 diabetics. The key, the insulin is present, but the lock has some issues. The lock is being resistant to the key. It's not allowing the key to, for example, turn. And this is where the term insulin resistance comes from. The cell is resistant. It's not letting the key open itself. And the reason that develops, we're not 100% sure, but mostly it's because of inflammation and also because of abdominal obesity. That is what they are saying, but it's not affirmative. We don't know if the insulin resistance itself causes the obesity to happen, the abdominal obesity, or if because you have abdominal obesity, you in turn develop insulin resistance. But the fact of the matter is, because you can no longer open the key properly, open the cell properly, the glucose cannot, the batteries cannot get into the cell.
Yep.
If they can't get into the cell, you can't have power, you can't function. And This is why diabetics are always tired.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not able to get the batteries in the cell, so they can't function. Now, that's not their fault.
Yep.
You can't blame them for that. There's something malfunctioning in their system.
Yep.
So what we're trying to do is, once you understand that this is what's happening with the system, this is what's happening with your body, then you can now figure out, okay, how can I become less insulin resistant or more insulin sensitive? And one of the best ways to do that is, of course, obviously taking care of your nutrition, but also exercise. When we exercise, the body naturally opens up those keys, opens up the locks. There's a specific pathway called the GLUT4 pathway, which is naturally opened when we exercise, that naturally opens up the locks on its own. You don't even need the insulin. So the glucose can go right in.
Yep.
Right. This is also the reason why when we have too much sugar in the system, in the blood, then the body tries to get rid of it. And that's why diabetics have to pee a lot. And their urine is actually sweet because there's sugar in it.
Yep.
Anyways, I don't want to get into the details, but that's the nutshell of what is happening with the diabetic.
Right.
So insulin resistance is that resistance to the insulin coming in, attaching, and being able to open the cell. And we want to decrease that. We want to increase the sensitivity of insulin.
Makes sense. It makes sense. And then initially you started talking about, man, I didn't want to interrupt, but I did want to have that insulin sensitivity sort of covered before we went further, because you were.
Okay. So, yes, I think we lost our train of thought.
My bad. That was my fault, but I had to get that out. You were talking about insulin sensitivity and how. You remember?
I'm not in your head.
Okay.
That
so,
sounded like a complete thought to me.
Yeah, so I think what we were talking about was the whole idea you asked about. The one thing to that would be to help them educate themselves about it.
Right.
And
yes.
From there, we went into the concept of what. Oh yes, I remember now. Well, what I was talking about is to not blame them, because
there you go.
We don't know what the root cause is. Insulin resistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can't blame them for that, because we don't know if their obesity, the abdominal obesity, caused that, or if insulin resistance was present before and that caused the abdominal obesity. And insulin resistance can present itself through various ways. A lot of times it's chronic stress. So if you are chronically stressed over years, your cortisol levels have been elevated for too long, you also develop insulin resistance. So it doesn't always come down to, oh, you don't move enough or you don't eat healthy enough.
Yeah.
It can be many factors. A lot of times it's you're genetically disposed to it, like I am. But that doesn't mean that it's like this. I like to say that if you're genetically disposed to it, if one of your parents has diabetes, you have a 50% chance of getting it.
Right.
If two of your parents have it, you have an 80% chance of developing it. But just because you have a chance doesn't mean that you're gonna get it. It's like, taking a gun, loading it with the bullets, and now you have a loaded gun, but it's up to you to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
And the trigger that is going to be pulled is going to be the environmental aspects of it. So if you take care of yourself, you take care of your environment, you take care of your health, your nutrition, your exercise, that trigger is not getting pulled. And that's the case for me, right? So you always have that control of pulling the trigger. You don't take care of the environment, yes, the trigger might be pulled, and then yes, you may have diabetes. So there's a lot of different reasons why you might develop it. It's not as simple as, oh, you're fat and lazy, you have it. It might be a big reason, but that might not be the only reason. So this is another reason why that was one of the bigger points that I want to hit home was for the listeners, is that if you're diabetic, it's not necessarily your fault, but that also doesn't mean that you don't need to be accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yep. I like the way you put that. I like the way you put that a lot. And switching gears just a little bit, is there one thing that kind of makes you roll your eyes, or is there a common misconception or like rumor that you're like, no, I don't believe that? Is there one big thing?
Yeah.
What is it?
And this goes back to saying, the whole, the marketing of it all is, that one thing. So a lot of times, insulin is considered a, fat storage hormone. And it is a fat. It stores your fat, but I think it's demonized for that. But like, if your insulin is high, your insulin is always high. You're going to be storing fat at all the time, so you shouldn't keep your insulin low. So for a lot of diabetics, because they're also on exogenous insulin, they feel like that is a reason that they're gaining weight. But it's looking at it in a microscope.
Yep.
Which is true. That micro level, that micro instant, yes, you're putting on fat if your insulin is high. But when you look at a 24-hour period in the macro scale, when your insulin is not on, that cell is also releasing the fat, and you're using it. So just because you're putting fat into a cell doesn't mean you're getting fatter.
Right.
Because there's going to be a time when you need the energy demand, the fat will release the cell as well. So yes, insulin is allowing you to store fat in that instance, but in a 24-hour period or in a macro level, it's also going to release it eventually when it doesn't need it. So you're going to be in a balance depending on your caloric intake. What will always matter is your caloric intake. So yes, if the fat cell is released and you don't use it because you're not either expending energy or you haven't put in, or you've put in too much energy to begin with, then yes, you're going to store it. But if you put in less energy and you're also using it, you're going to be able to release that fat cell, utilize it, and you won't get fat.
Yeah.
So I think is the biggest misconception is this whole concept of insulin is the reason why you're getting fatter.
Okay.
It's not. It's always going to be the calorie deficit or the caloric intake, calories in versus calorie out. In that instant, in that micro level, yes, insulin will make you fatter. But just because the fat cell is getting more fat doesn't mean you're gaining fat. Eventually, in that 24-hour period, when you're not eating or when you're sleeping, it's also going to release the fat because now the body needs it. The energy demands are there.
It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So shifting gears a little bit more, it's very obvious that you're passionate and extremely knowledgeable in this realm. And
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say I'm extremely knowledgeable. I don't think I know enough. I learn a lot more.
A good student has never learned at all. So a good student continues to learn. Well, if that's the case, you just bullshitted your way really well through this whole podcast. This is shifting gears back to you and what you do. What is your definition of happiness? There's no right or wrong answer. It's very specific to you.
I think for me, this has changed in the last few months because I've always been stable. You know, I never really get too happy. I never really get too sad.
Okay.
I've always been a very calm and stable person. And I realized that that's not the case. I'm actually very anxious all the time, but I don't show it.
Okay.
I'm very calm and collected when you look at me, but inside a lot of chaos is happening. So what I realized is that I think happiness is your ability to be able to understand, to be able to be in the moment.
Okay.
To be able to, it's kind of voodoo what I'm saying. I don't know if your audience is used to
this
type of stuff, but like,
oh yeah, bro. They're used to it with me. It's okay. It's all good.
So like it's the ability to be in the present moment and enjoy the present moment, because if you're in the present moment, you will always enjoy it. There's no reason to not, because you're alive and you're here. I feel like we're always in our heads. So if we're not in the present moment, we're either thinking too much in the future or we're thinking too much in the past. And that allows us to be in a position of for most people an anxiety, depending on what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
So being able to come back to the present as many times as you possibly can throughout the day will always put you in a position of peace and happiness for me. And I've been doing a lot of that through a lot of mindset work and meditation work recently. And that's why my definition of happiness has shifted to being able to be present in the moment and knowing what that's like, because most people don't know what that's like, and they live their whole lives without ever being able to experience that. Otherwise, the general being happy, you're just smiling or you're happy, but like I don't really think that. I think that's very short-lived.
Sure.
I think this is something that's more powerful for me.
I like it. And I question you, the audience. One thing that you just said, Ghulam, is that it changes. And Jenna, you've always said it's okay for it to change. And I fully agree that it's totally okay for it to change as you age, as you change as a person, whatever. It's okay for that happiness point to change. But I'm asking you, the audience, for a second, pause us and answer that question to yourself. What is your definition of happiness? And then ask yourself, why is that your definition of happiness? And why is it evolving? You got a lot of questions. All right, press pause. Okay, you back? Jenna, what you got? You got anything?
I think it's been really, honestly, educational for me, even being a healthcare professional. From our side of it, the education piece to our patients is like this much.
100%. Absolutely.
And I think that's a really big missing piece to a lot of chronic medical conditions, is someone to sit down and be a coach rather than a prescriber or just treating what's right in front of you and moving on.
Yep.
I think that's really awesome that you are taking your focus on something that's not really well understood and has a lot of societal kind of impressions that aren't really accurate, and trying to change that. It's awesome.
Well, and you're 1,000% right. I damn sure learned quite a bit as well. And like I said at the top of the show, like, I feel like the knowledge that we have as nurses in the healthcare realm, which is, I think, viewed as the safe haven or safety point for anyone. They listen to what the doctor says no matter what. And I'm not demonizing doctors, but just because they're healthcare professionals doesn't mean they have all the answers. I truly, truly believe that, a health coach or Ghulam or someone that is driven in this way to understand the why can have just as much of an impact, if not more.
Yeah, well, because the focus of education from the healthcare system is take your medication.
Yep. Symptoms.
Yep.
Let's treat the symptoms, not the cause.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been awesome, man. I can and I will. I was going to say I could, but I will be talking to you soon, and I can definitely see us doing another podcast without a doubt, maybe going into a different realm, but I've truly enjoyed it. Is there anything else you want to say, anything else that you needed to get out?
No, it's been a pleasure.
It's been awesome.
Thank you so much, and I learned a lot too. Even while I was speaking, I was learning.
I didn't realize I knew that. It was really good.
But yeah, no, it's been really, really nice.
Cool.
And I'd love to get on another podcast with you guys at a future date. It's been an honor.
We'll do it. Guys, I want to know what you think of Ghulam. What do you think of this podcast? In the comments on the YouTube channel, the BTYE podcast, leave some comments. Let us know what you thought about this episode. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, do us a flavor. If you're feeling squirrely, whether it's positive or negative, leave us a review. We'd like to know what you think. We truly appreciate it. And before we go, I did want to plug, which again, is going to be in the description below, but Ghulam, hit them with your information, how they can contact you, how they can become a client, all of your friggin' content. This man's all over TikTok. I keep watching what you're doing. Plug it all.
If you'd like to get in touch with me, the best place would be to add me as a friend on Facebook, because I don't have enough friends. So I'd love to have more friends on Facebook. But my name is Ghulam Ahmad. You can just find me with that. And everywhere else, my Instagram, my YouTube channel, TikTok, all the other platforms is Gene Activated. GeneActivated. That's 2 words, and that's about it.
And then Ghulam is Ghulam. Is that right?
Yeah, GhulamAhmad.
There it is. Well, awesome. I really appreciate you, man. I'll be talking to you soon. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.
This has been the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast. We want to thank you for listening and invite you to subscribe to the show as well. And follow Matt Lane Fitness on YouTube. Until next time, you don't have to be perfect. Just be better than yesterday every day.
Smooth, man. Team one take.
It was good.
Yeah.
You did really, really good. I'm not surprised, but that was damn good, bro.
Could you hear the dog snoring in the background?
I didn't hear anything. Or maybe you guys will pick it up.